those are things that are based upon what our wages are. So those are set figures. For the utilities, I raised it up based upon what we had. Because we don't, I believe I raised it up 2.7%, because I believe the electric utilities are gonna go up as well every year. That's why I bumped it up $100. Same with the gas utilities. Telephone is going up, and the reason it goes up is because of the fact that we have our hotspots in our cars, which is like a modem, okay? So each car has a hotspot, each car has its own phone with a camera. We have telephones for the lieutenant, myself, and the investigator. We also have, that's it so far, right? Okay, that, and also in that telephone utility, I included our internet service as well. So that's why that figure is in there the way it is. And if you notice, the charges this year are actually more than what we budgeted, and that's why I bumped it up. Our repair and maintenance services, I went an extra 4. The reason I did that is because we don't know what may or may not be done, because the building is getting older and we don't know what may have to be fixed.
That's not an extra 4, that's 4,000 total.
Correct.
Okay.
Oh, I apologize,
You
okay.
only went up 1,000.
Yeah, because like in our squad room where everybody sits, we have 2 electrical outlets, but that's gonna have to be changed, but that's part of the capital improvement, right? Okay, so then let's drop that down to 3. I wasn't sure. We're running everything off of 2 15 amp plugins. The other contractual services are the services that we have contracts for as far as Profinix, Axon, Accunet, the county WDA, the county Profinix fees, the money that we have to pay the state of Wisconsin for the Criminal Investigation Bureau for CID for the use of the MDTs for the officers that use them. That's part of our Rackspace email as well. I included that all in there. And that's why I have it at $19,000.
On the worksheet you gave me, you only had 1,900, so I didn't think that was right.
Oh, you're absolutely right. 1,900, I did write that down. Thanks for catching that.
Yeah, I
Okay.
didn't think 1,900 was gonna cover everything.
No, it wouldn't, it sure wouldn't. Thank you. And then under office equipment, I left that the same. Office equipment would include laptops, our computers, things like that. That's how I do my office equipment. General office supplies, it's self-explanatory. That comes into the different items that we use within the office, paper, staples, things like that. That's usually ordered through the front office, and then Chris lets Kim and Joanne know what things are for us. Postage, that's self-explanatory. Subscriptions and dues have to do with the organization, the professional organizations that we belong to. Those are the dues and subscription prices. Seminar fees, I bumped up to $5,000, and the reason that I did that, 2,000 more than last year, is we weren't able to participate in seminars this year because of COVID, and we really believe that next year there's going to be more seminars available for the people to go to, so that we would be able to increase the knowledge of the officers to make us even more professional than we are right now. So there'll be a lot of things coming up. And perhaps some of these items we're going to be able to do online instead of having to travel and do them, because they are now doing training online versus going to a classroom.
If you guys didn't go this past year, is there money that will transfer over?
I don't believe we can do that. I believe the money that's there that we didn't spend is just not spent. And our budget is based upon for next year. That would be wonderful if we could do that, but I don't think legally we can do that, but that's a question that Kim would have to answer.
I mean, it depends, you'd have to wait till the end of the year before we did it. I mean, it's way
Just
too
curious.
early to tell.
Just curious.
Because we've only spent some dollars so far for seminars this year. Seminar travel and lodging, well, that just strictly talks about, mileage there and back and the cost of the rooms. However, as everyone knows, since I came here, I've made some improvements. I minimized the amount of personal vehicle use when people go to a school. They use our spare squad, that's what it's for, and they go back and forth using that squad instead of spending 58 cents a mile for somebody to go to school and back. So we're saving money on mileage. And the cars here, we might as well use it. Our operating supplies are just what they say, the things that we use on a day-to-day, repair and maintenance items. Well, this year, we ended up, having to do some repairs on different items that broke down through attrition that just happened. And also, I wanna let everybody know that if we go back to page 6, where it reads repair and maintenance, when you see that there's like a $4,000 difference in what we budgeted, people may question that, but I wanna let everybody know here who's present that, as you know, we share the radio system with the village of East Troy. And if the radio system breaks down or needs repairs, we split the cost of that based upon percentages. And our percentage for the repair this year.
Well, actually, they didn't bill us in 2019 for our portion of it, so that's why we got hit this year.
In 2018, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, no, 2019, then they get us this year, so it was, we
that's
knew
why
it was
we're-
coming, but they didn't bill us yet, so that's why that happened. And while we're talking about radios, I would like to share with the board that there will be a new radio system coming up for the county, and that new radio system will be put into place within the next several years, but I can tell you that it will be expensive. It'll be a cost share by municipalities with the county. And hopefully there will be some grant money to help offset that, hopefully. And the other item that's important to remember is it sounds like the county is going to make the initial payment, and then we as individual law enforcement agencies, and perhaps the fire department too, will be able to make payments, so it won't hit us real big. The radios that I purchased in 2018 are digital. The radios that I purchased in 2018, because I saw this coming down the pipe, we will be able to use those radios because they're able to be digitally modified to work for the system. So instead of having to spend between $4,000 and $6,000 on new radios, the radios we have now will be able to be modified at a cost of probably between $800 and $1,000 a piece. Alright, so that saves us a bundle of money down the road.
Now, this is the same radio system statewide. You want to have one frequency for police, fire and emergency, Department of Public Works, and maybe somebody else, all on one frequency, or you have to,
Change channels.
yeah, you have to change channel, and how the channels are. At the time they started this process, 2 years ago, it was gonna be 100% state cost, all of it. Obviously, that's changed now, because they find out that they're not gonna be able to fund it themselves either. But, even within our area here, I guess that would be an improvement, but we still think it's several years away.
2 to 3, yes, and not yesterday, yesterday was Monday. Yes, yesterday when I came back to work, the email was in my inbox, and I have a complete report. It's actually a summary report telling me how things may go. It doesn't mean it's set in stone, because everything is fluid, so I have that. It can help immensely, because right now, our radios, because we share the frequency with the village, at times, we have no radio. If the radio goes down, we have nothing. If we're in certain parts of our community, we have no cell signal. If we're in certain buildings or homes within our community, we have no radio signal. We have to pull out the phone, which is why I got a phone for each car, because I don't want the guys using the personal, yes, they are pink. That way they don't lose it. If it falls, they can see it. That way they can use the radio to call their stuff if they have to. So, I apologize for going on a segue, but I just wanted to let everybody know about that $4,000 bump that wasn't anticipated on the budget for this year. Now let's get to the other part about line one of,
What about equipment though?
well, 52,000 for equipment. What page am I on? Oh, here we go, page 8.
Seven.
Seven, we're still on seven,
And 7?
yeah.
Okay, equipment would be 52, and that would cover the replacement of squad 18, which has 96,000 miles on it. So it would be squad 18, it would be the replacement of the squad and the equipment that's needed to make it a police squad. We do not have to buy a radio, and we do not have to buy radar because it's transferable from car to car. And then, of course, under equipment would be other things that we would use in our duties, like if something were to break, like for example, our entry tools. If we did purchase entry tools this year, so next year, if an entry tool would break, then we would have to replace that. That would all fall under the equipment.
Plus tires. I mean,
Oh, yeah, that's right, tires and.
tires, brakes, oil
Brakes,
changes, I mean,
oil changes, all that falls under.
that's all under there.
Thank you for reminding me. Now let's go to line number 1 of salaried wages. For the last several years, I've asked for an increase in manpower on the department. And I want to provide the board with the figures with the formula that I was taught when I went to staff and command school, as to how things should be figured out for properly staffing a police department. What you do is, I'll just very briefly go over this, is in order to determine the number of officers that you need on the department, you take the total number of calls over a certain period of time. So I did that, and our department, since I got here in 2017, we've handled 33,122 calls for service. So then you have to come up with a median, and our median calls for service is 9231 a year. So then you say to yourself, well, how do you determine how many people you actually need for patrol positions? So you take the number of incidents, which is the 9,231, you divide that by the average amount of time a person spends on a call. Now, how do you determine that? It's very simple. What we do is we determine the number of calls and how much time is spent on a call. So some calls may only take 10 minutes. Other calls may take a day or two. Like, for example, sexual assaults, burglaries, thefts, calls that require additional follow-up, et cetera, so that what you do is you take that. So I figured it ended up coming out to an average of 30 minutes a call. A buffer time, that's the amount of time that a person spends where they aren't actually engaged in something like a traffic stop, or perhaps they're stuck at a traffic corner for traffic control, things like that. So those figures are put together in an equation, and it comes out to 4.68 positions. So then what you have to do is you have to calculate, that's on the back of the page, the number of persons required to fill one position. Well, you base your planning on 365 days, which is one person, estimated off days. So I broke that down as to how many off days each individual person gets based upon a 1-year period. So in the off group, according to the contract, they get 112 off days a year, 11 holidays. The average vacation time is 14. Now, some of the guys only get a week, some of the guys get more. I took the average sick leave is 2 a year, the average training time is 3 a year, 24 hours, because that's required by law. The military leave is 0, there's no one on our department who is on the reserves. Court time, number of days in court, comp off time, number of average days. Suspensions, I put 1. The reason I put 1 is because you never know if it may happen, but you still have to keep that into the equation. Special assignments would be, let's say, somebody has to go and fill in for another department. We didn't get called, and I didn't volunteer our department to go to Kenosha or any other place for these, riots, because I wanted our town to be covered with our own people and not be uncovered. So the total number of days away from the job a year is 155, minus the 365 is your 210, that's your planning days. So you do the 365 divided by 210, and 10, that means you should have 1.74 persons to fill 1 position. So the 4.68 that I came up with, which is the number of patrol positions required times 1.74, means that the department should have 8 patrol officers. Now, if you look at the village of East Troy, or you look at the surrounding communities of our size, that's what they have, if not more, for full-time officers on their departments. And they do not have the same calls for service numbers that we do.
Are they calculated the exact same way?
Well, actually, what I found out is some departments don't even log what they do. Like what was done prior to 2017. You know, people did a day book, but they didn't log all of their activity, like vacation checks, traffic stops, extra patrols, things like that. They weren't logged.
Well, if they're not logged, then how can you rationally compare the number of people necessary from one department to another? It's not logged the same way.
Because how do I compare? Well, actually, I looked at the village, which covers 2 square miles, and I looked at ourselves, we cover 33 square miles. And our call of the area that we cover is much larger, and we have more calls than they have. And we have 6 coppers versus 8. So, like I had mentioned a couple of years ago, I had asked for additional officers, but it wasn't able to be worked out into the budget, and I never showed you guys how I worked that out. I wanted to give you something solid and concrete so that you can see that. So that's why there's 2 figures in here for salary wages. One, the top figure, would be with 2 additional officers at a new wage, and the second figure would be with our current staffing at the wages that would be there based upon the contracts.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
And again, this is based on 2 shifts versus 3.
No, this is all 3 shifts.
Basically on 3.
Yes. So by increasing by 2, it would allow us to have 2 additional officers during the time period. Yes. For example, in the village, they have 8, but if you recall, during the winter months, the school years, they have a full-time officer in the school. Yes, and then during the summer, then that officer's out on the street.
Why does the overtime go up with 2 additional officers? Shouldn't it go down?
Well, if you look at the overtime, when I wrote that, that should be reversed. And the reason that I put in 43,000 for overtime versus 15 is I'll let you know, FMLA is gonna be coming up. Cause we're gonna have an officer who's gonna become a dad, and he may end up taking off the maximum amount of time for FMLA, and I may not be able to cover that without overtime.
Isn't that what a part-time officers are used for, is covering when you can't fill?
Yep, I do have the part-time officers to cover,
Okay.
but they may not always be able to work.
So in
And you
other
can't
words,
force a part-time guy to work.
right, so in other words, you're putting down worst case scenario,
I am.
okay?
I always like to, if you can, if it's preventable, if it's predictable, it's preventable. So that's why I'm putting it down.
If there's an officer on an FMLA and another one gets injured, we're not gonna be covering third shift. I didn't schedule it, it would be impossible. The part-timers have other obligations, other departments, and they can only work so much that we're not paying them into additional funds from the state to over certain hours to.
Yeah.
So they can only work such an amount.
And and a lot of people don't realize this, but I'm sure that you do, maybe the folks out here don't, but the part-time officers are also covered under the contract. So they have, they're contractually, we have contractual obligations to them as well while they're working. That's just something to consider. A lot of people didn't realize the part-timers were even in the union, but yeah.
The figures I use for employer, social security, Medicare, retirement, those are based on
Four forty-three,
the current
correct.
staffing. So if you added additional staffing, those numbers would also go up.
Correct.
That would be the 36,308.81.
Yeah, that's social security and Medicare. That is accumulation of salary wages of 443, hourly wages of 16, and overtime hourly of 15. That's where the 36 came.
Mhm.
So
Thank you.
And the insurance will go up.
insurance would go up too, also for 2 months.
Would retirement also go up?